need to ask you to regroup with your client and get back to me within, I don't know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks with your thoughts on moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you what those thoughts will be, but I can tell you that I'll get back to you.
Well, I mean, Randy, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
You know, I'm trying to be very, very quiet because my attorney has cautioned me not to use words like catastrophic and...
Or catastrophic things will occur if you do.
Yeah, things of that nature. So I'm just sitting here letting Chris and you do all the talking. I know what we have. I've seen what we have. And I'm just going to take Chris's counsel.
Okay. I have a question. What went on here in 1951?
I'm sure the attorney's going to show it to me in fact. Can you identify what they said?
Yeah, that's one corner of Area B, and it appears you can't really make it out, but I can show you.
Yeah, if you could.
So these are trenches, and this is the tower for testing, simulant tower, and this is Shookstown Road. You can get back to me with an explanation of what went on there and what went into those trenches. I'd be most appreciative.
Okay, do you have an email?
That's it.
An email
how do we
address.
get
Do you have an
back to you?
email
Oh,
address?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we have the records that we have. I'm not sure if it will tell you what went into that trench right there, but it'll be a description of what went into Area B6, which is this
Sure.
pyramidal shaped area. So we could give you a very swift indication of what went into B6. I will probably never be able
Was
to tell
that
you.
capped?
B6
That's
was
the
one of
secondary
them.
question.
Yes, it was. I can show you the presentation from last
Yeah,
night.
it was on there.
It was. It's kind of a polygonal shaped cap.
Do you have a copy of that, John?
That one right there. So I do have a description of what went into B6, but I couldn't tell you in that circle.
Okay.
Or
Right,
never.
right,
Is there anybody living that put the stuff in there?
I presume there are now, but it's probably been, that practice was stopped around 72, maybe 73. So that was...
So if you know of anybody that did that...
Well, I really don't.
perhaps you could-
I honestly don't.
Okay.
I do.
Can you identify the person?
I'd prefer not to. Won't count my counsel.
I mean, I don't know who they are, so I can't, but I think out of respect for people's own interest in keeping their own identities private, it's just not fair to them. I mean, as much as it might be, I don't know, we can talk about it and see if there's some, but it would be, and we can use pit bull analogies, we can use whatever, but from, I think, this side's perspective, the fact that it does not appear, and maybe we just haven't heard it yet, that Fort Detrick is doing the same type of, I mean, these people put together a team of researchers and went out and found these things out. They didn't start with this knowledge. So certainly Fort Detrick has the same capability, if not a much, much greater capability, to gather this same information. And so there's a real, there's a cause of concern.
Actually, I would, if I were you, I would call in the national team, the national response team for the US EPA to help you out, because your present consultant doesn't seem to cut it.
Well, I think people may be missing the fact that this pit bull was let out of the gate prior to 1972. And we've done a lot now to cover up that pit bull's carcass and make sure it's under a cap and make sure the rain doesn't come down through it. But the pit bull got out the gate prior to 1972. So what do you want the National Response Team to do about that?
Take samples for dioxin. That's what I'd really like, because a simple preliminary assessment would make them and me do that.
Well, in this work plan that you see, there will be sampling for dioxins and for pesticides of the surface, which has never been done before. But all the investigations done to date have looked, in the trenching operations and the soil borings and the well construction, have looked at PCBs, pesticides, those things.
There's a sinkhole in Area B. If you look down it, I'm told, I haven't strayed onto your property. If you look down it, 40 feet, you see stuff, like containers of stuff down it. Do you know anything about that?
No. I will tell you, I'm aware of a sinkhole that was filled to the ground surface, and you could see debris sticking out of it, and it's now underneath the cap. I will tell you that much.
That's a pity. Okay. I was kind of hoping it was open and somebody in a level A suit could just go down there and just, take some labels and stuff.
All of the waste, all of the waste that we are aware of at Area D, except for in the active landfill, and we do have an active landfill, but in the inactive landfills, all of the waste that we are now aware of is under impermeable cover.
I want to take you up on your offer from your commander of a site visit, and I will bring along the guy that as a boy wandered over there and, despite his father's advice, looked down there regularly to see this stuff. Okay?
Well, I don't know that we're going to take him up on that offer, but.
Okay.
Well, you won't find that 40-foot deep hole today.
Right.
It'll be covered.
No, of course.
Well,
Of course.
okay, I still would like to see, I repeat, I still would like to see the site, and I would like to take one or two people at least from the community on there to kick the tires and just see.
Well, when you say kick the tires, what do you mean?
Well, they have certain ideas of what went on. They themselves are still alive that saw stuff buried and stuff down. So it's going to be informative to me and you to do that.
But they're not, Fort Detrick's not denying that they buried it or that it's there.
No, but I'm just saying, if it's still open.
And they've already confirmed that it's contained.
Excuse me,
but
they don't know until certain individuals stand over what was the hole and say, yep, that's full to the top.
Well, there are two holes
Right.
there today, and those holes were created during our most recent well drilling operation. They were quite deep. The EPA wants us to drill deeply.
Right.
And we created 2 sinkholes. But I assure you there's no debris in there. There is no place that you can look down into today and find debris.
And John, I'll talk with the commander to see how we can get a site visit scheduled, and I have her email, so I'll make sure, yeah. But I'll tell you that when you go out there, I think you're going to be disappointed, because the most exciting thing you're going to see is grass growing.
Well, that wouldn't be disappointing.
Well, I just don't want to, I don't want you to have your,
I mean, I think you understand this wrong. We don't want to find something.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't want anyone else to die. We have experienced death. He lost his daughter. He's losing his former wife. The mother of his children has terminal cancer right now. He has a son that is now at possible risk. He himself could be at possible risk. His daughter had tumors removed from her stomach. Okay, so this is definitely affecting us personally. It's not about seeing grass grow or being disappointed that something's done about it. That was the whole initial start of this campaign, was to make sure something is done about it. If we wanted to just do a lawsuit, we would have said, screw you, we'll see you at court, I'm not going to say anything to you, and we'll blindside you, right? That's the smart thing to do. So why would we spend all of this time trying to communicate with everybody and trying to actually have a form of conversation if that was the initial goal? So that's absurd to say we'll be disappointed.
Well, with the commander's and the attorney's approval, I'd love to give you the tour. But you're worried about health effects? Let me caution you about Lyme disease,
We're
Rocky
not
Mountain,
going- yeah.
Spotted Fever.
Oh, no,
There
I
are-
thought we'd be taken from location to location on a bus.
Oh, I'd be happy to, but if you want to see the sinkhole, you got to walk where the ticks are.
I do
And
that
we
all
can-
Look,
the
if
time.
John
wait
wants
till
to
winter.
go see that, that is fine. We're not, we are not saying.
If I'm walking out there in the
You're
summer,
lucky I'm even in Frederick County.
I'm
So,
putting on Tyvek and putting spray on my legs
That's a good
before I
idea.
walk out there.
That's a good idea.
I just don't want that playing in the press that Detrick official puts on Tyvek to walk my cat.
Can I bring us back? I think this discussion brings out a certain point, which is you talked about the pit bull coming out in '72 or was whatever, and you're trying to cover the carcass. What a lot of the people's concern, and this is a community issue, maybe more so than it is just the people in this room, is that we might all come to the conclusion that Detrick is a safe place to live next to right now. But we may not come to the same conclusion that it was safe 20, 30 years ago. And the fact that it wasn't safe 20 or 30 years ago, we know from plenty of science, will have lasting impact, okay? Generation to generation impact. And so that's something that I don't think that you guys, that Detrick will find it within their, you know, as we've discussed, within their realm to investigate. But when we hear stories about spread it out on the field and light it on fire, and those fires happen in the middle of the night, and we sat there and watched it, and then, you know, 6 of 10 people in the house had cancer, those are concerning stories, and they're not addressed by, you know, a 1999 to 2000 cancer assessment or a, you know, year 2010 work plan, because they don't, you see, I mean, there's a disjointedness there. So a lot of the concern that's brought to a head in this room, but is represented by families and people from the community, it's not, you know, it goes back to the 50s when the pit bull was what appears to be running wild without a chain, and lighting fires. And I've lived on army bases, and they've had burning grounds, and the pit bull runs wild sometimes. In Camp Lejeune, it ran wild.
They don't run anymore like that anywhere in army bases.
Right,
Those
but
are
the
all problems
effects
past.
of those problems of the past
Actually, no.
linger.
But how do you actually acquire the data from that period of time in the 50s and the 60s before there was even a law called RECRA or CERCLA? How do you produce the data to say, oh, but they did have this going and billowing across the road on this day in 1955? I can't do that, and I don't know how anybody can do that.
Well, we don't need to get into that specific debate, but we would certainly believe that you would be in a better position to develop that scenario than we would be, because we don't know. We hear a story that in the 1960s and 70s, they would take it out to Area A and light it on fire, and there it goes up in smoke. We have no clue what was in there, but certainly, hopefully, I would think someone at Detrick knows the name of that pit bull. And the breed of that
We
pit
know
bull.
what the pit bull carcass name was that's in that trench in B6. I couldn't tell you what was burned in that burn pit on that given day.
Could you tell me what was done with the simulant tower?
The tower itself?
Yeah, I mean, just names
What
of
was done in
chemicals.
terms of use? To the best of my knowledge, no chemicals were dispersed from the simulant tower. They were used to disperse simulant bacteria. Now, of course, there was an offensive warfare period. That ended in 1969. But we did not test those agents that were intended to kill. We tested simulant material. And one of those simulants is Serratia marcescens, SM for short. It is ubiquitous in the environment, and it happened to be in high concentrations apparently during those tests, and they just tested how they dispersed. Not how effective they were in killing, but how they dispersed.
Okay.
And that was the intent of the test.
Given that Agent Orange is known the world over, in general, would you like to tell me what was done to test Agent Orange on Fort Detrick and Area B?
Well, from the little bit of information that I've been able to learn in the last week and a half, there was 2 tests. One was a tower mounted on a pickup truck. And I believe that there may be some confusion of those towers. But apparently there was a tower on a pickup truck that drove through a field to simulate aerial from airplane dispersion.
Okay.
And so that was one of the tests. And according to...
Tell you what, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I can answer the other half of the question.
Yeah, go. Yeah, I'd like to hear.
He's
I'd like.
I can stop myself.
I'd like to hear the answer.
There was also reportedly flyovers of airplanes, so it was done from trucks and from airplanes. This is information that I've gleaned since it was raised to the forefront.
So, may I ask a
We're
question?
definitely on the same side there.
So you say just in the last week and a half, you just started talking about Agent Orange. So as smart as Detrick is, you got some of the most brilliant minds in the world working.
We hope.
We're
No, they do,
Go
they
on.
do.
I mean, for real, you got the greatest
He's
of
not
scientists.
sarcastic.
Why is it that just in the last week and a half you just started talking about
Well, as I
Agent
explained earlier in this forum,
Orange? Because of night.
1992,
Okay, I
in a
understand.
meeting that was just as important as the one that happened last night, those people said.
But they're not
"We don't
responsible
care."
for the pit. Detrick was responsible for the pit bull. So why didn't they say, you know what, damn it, we left the pit bull out? And
Sir, I told you what I know, okay?
No, but I'm just
This
trying-
is
I'm
where
just-
we are today. I told you what I know. I
No,
cannot
no,
explain why people made certain decisions in 1992.
All right, but now I'm asking you, why just in the last week and a half?
What sparked your interest in that in the last week and a half?
Well, obviously, it was you folks, okay? We knew about Agent Orange utilization in the greenhouse environment. We knew about it, and there was not a release. It was not a release to the environment. And even Mr. Covert's book, knew that there had been testing of Agent Orange. But the community said in 1992, and the regulators agreed, these are not contaminants.
Well, and that's because, I mean, my father-in-law fought in the war, okay? He died from a rare blood disorder, which came from the chemicals that were used in the war, okay? 50, 60 years ago, or 30 years ago, or whenever all of this occurred, it wasn't a concern to him, right? So obviously he was ignorant to the fact that that would later kill him. So we have people in Vietnam, and I think Amy said it yesterday. I mean, they've been concerned about this, and it's gotten so much attention that we've got Secretary Clinton over there saving $300 million to do cleanup, and we developed it here, we simulated it here, and we never even began to think about how that would affect until a week and a half ago?
Well, I think it's fair.
Does that make sense?
I think it's fair to consider the quantities that might have been used in a combat environment and the quantities that might have been used in a testing environment.
What?
They were probably relatively small amounts utilized at Fort Detrick.
So if you
versus
take
massive
Vietnam
quantities.
and you take
Well,
1 mile radius of Fort Detrick, or...
I mean, if you're doing flyovers and you've got people that live
Correct.
every day, 24 hours in that foliage, that, I mean, I understand, I don't think we know how much was used.
Well,
But I think the question is, what you keep relying on is 1992, the public said, and number one, who in the public was informed?
And how many?
Better than Detrick. So why doesn't Detrick come in and say, well, we know that we did some flyover experiments, so A on the list, we're going to have pesticides, herbicides.
Is there anything
dioxins.
else you'd like us to do?
What else should we do? And they say, well, PC and TC, we got a concern, whatever. But that wasn't done, and I think for both sides here, we're not going to correct that. I mean, we don't think it's
No,
a
but can
fair...
we correct that for the future?
Right, but we don't think that it's
20
a
years
fair
from now?
excuse or that it's a credible excuse to say, well, in 1992, Joe Public told us what to do.
Well, I'm saying that, let me propose something. As Bob said, we are still learning, and we're going to be investigating everything we can on Agent Orange.
Which,
But-
as soon as you say that, I know you got 5 people's mouths going, why the heck are you still learning? But, go on.
Well-
I mean, I'm just
Well,
telling you what our
Let
reaction
me
is.
just finish. Barbara is going to be having a meeting, a public meeting.
Yeah, I'm hoping the next 2 weeks. I haven't heard when Winchester Hall's available, because I know they have, because that first floor hearing room really is the best. It's the largest,
Great.
the most comfortable, and they can easily do the video for us. So they do have some planning commission and some other meetings that occur there. So I, at least before I came into this room, didn't hear about the availability yet, but whenever it's available, whatever, you know, if it's just one night, we'll make it, you know, whatever that one night is. Hopefully it's not Friday, right?
But what I'd like to do is see if anybody would oppose the idea of meeting, having this group meet again, whether it's the afternoon of Barbara's meeting or the day after, to continue this dialogue. Anybody oppose that?
Do you have to leave? I mean, do you have, what time is it?
I don't have, at some point tonight I have to.
Five.
My wife will not pleased.
Well,
But
you
the
know.
point is,
Well, okay, go ahead.
I mean, the point is, what I want to do is not lose our discussion and the momentum we've created today.
Well, that's where I'd like to go with this, again, if I may. So, I forget your name, sir.
Bob Craig.
Bob Craig. So you're saying that it took the Kristen Renee Foundation to raise the issue of Agent Orange to that entire area of Fort Detrick. Is that what you're saying?
No.
And what did you, all right, you say what, tell me.
The CERCLA process has driven the United States Army to look at disposal sites. The entire CERCLA program has been focused on looking at these disposal sites of the past and making sure that they are protective of human health and the environment. You were talking about something that was not associated with a disposal site, something that was used in science.
I understand.
This is I've actually talked with Mr. Stokoloski, as you have. I asked Hank, Agent Orange was used more than in Fort Detrick. What else is going on up there? He said, this is the first time this has come up.
That's just
That's
absolutely astounding to me. Now
We're
here's my
talking about
next question.
superficial application. We're not talking about burials in pits and trenches.
No, I understand.
People have been looking at that for decades. You're talking about superficial application in science in preparation for a war.
I understand that, but now, in that week and a half that you kind of analyze, getting information, etc., and going back, do you know how much was used? None of that. So you don't have any clue of any of that. How many times they flew over?
No.
Where?
And not, we don't even know exactly where, because it will say application of fields A, B, C, D here and E, F, and G over there. Don't know where they are yet. We
All right,
we
now
need to do some serious research.
Maybe we should have a meeting somewhere else. We're a little close to A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
As an engineer, I don't worry about something that might have been applied 45 years ago and has been exposed to the sun and the weather for 45 years, because those chemicals break down.
As a chemical engineer,
Like in
with a
Vietnam?
master's degree,
Right.
I worry about those things.
They break down.
Did you just hear what
They
he
stay
said?
in your fat for a long, long
Talking about
time.
the soil.
They stay in the soil for a fair amount of time too. We'll find out.
We will find out together.
But may I just stay along this line just for a moment? Now that you know that Agent Orange was used with flyovers, etc., okay, are you going to make the public aware of that?
Well, I think you made the public aware of Agent Orange last night.
Well, no.
Now,
Well, the
flyover
public
information-
You have no clue what I wanted to do.
The subtle information here is, do we make them aware of the flyover? I'm gonna have to talk to our attorney.
Listen, I'm being very serious. He's put the chains on me because I want to go pedal to the metal. I'll use that word. And really expose some things that we have. I wrote it. And Chris said, let's kind of talk this thing through, see if we can work it out, etc. Let's look at the community as a whole. Fort Detrick, great people, 2,000 employees, etc. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. That's why we're at this meeting. But my question is, now that you know that Agent Orange was used, are you, as Fort Detrick, going to make the public aware?
Well, what I think is the most appropriate way to handle this, Randy, is we have our RAD. Restoration Advisory Board.
Okay, hold on.
Wait.
No, I have to stop.
Let me just finish.
Oh, no, I have to stop.
Well,
Okay.
I'm willing to listen to any ideas that you might have on how we get this information out to the public. But the most...
I could do it.
Just like you said, we've made
I've
public
got
aware
Michael
of it.
Moore
But-
just waiting
from our point of view, now look at it from our point of view, we want to get this information out to the public because the public is now, raising the issue and is interested. For us, the most appropriate way to do it is probably through a RAD meeting.
Well, let me help you.
But, if you
Have
have
you
ideas on how better to do it.
Have you listened to the EPA message, correct? The one that we were.
Yeah.
The meeting?
Yeah, okay. And then no one knew who Chuck was, the publicist for someone else didn't know who the other
The
person
EPA
was.
didn't know.
No one was talking, and it was just kind of, no one knew anything actually, what was going on. And then we asked, well, how do you get the word out to the public? And the answer was, well, we really just kind of make it known to the people around in this area, in the Fort Detrick area. How do you get the word out to the public about these meetings?
Well, what we do is we have a press release, and Chuck is the individual who writes them and then gets them out.
To who? Who do you send it to?
It's to a good number of the local media and
Who?
the Baltimore Sun, Washington Post, Frederick News Post, Channel 9, Channel 25, Channel 4, got a list of about 20 or 30. Bob and the environmental folks run public notices in a lot of the local newspapers.
Okay, now she's my PR person. Well, she does a great job. But she can pull together 300 to 500 people just by doing a media blitz at one time and getting everyone together just by the wording. So do you just say RAD meeting 6:30 Winchester Hall? Or do you say topic of discussion?
Generally, in the news releases, we provide an agenda or topic of discussion. For instance, the one that went out recently, we discussed, we let folks know that the RAB was supposed to be discussing the work plan, getting that closed out, and we specifically invited the public in this time. We've never turned the public away before, but the RAB is not, strictly speaking, a public meeting. It is a commission, it is a board who gather to conduct business related to the restoration of Area B.
Is it going to be?
So the
For sure,
EPA
public
understands
in the
that.
The RAB was never intended to be specifically a public meeting. We do try to hold a couple of times a year public meetings for folks to come in. We give them an update. You guys attended the last one.
Right.
Things
And
ran a
did the
little over.
media, from what we heard from the community, it wasn't on television saying they're having a RAB meeting next Tuesday. So
Not necessarily, but I know that, for instance, WFMD is good about putting things like that out. Frederick News Post has always put stuff
so there are
like
a
that
couple
out.
of areas in the media that do
Sure.
announce it for you.
The maintenance, let me
Have
go
you
back.
thought of directly inviting residents? Have you thought of doing a
Again,
direct mail
the RAB
or?
is not necessarily a public meeting.
So for the EPA, they believe that the RAB is the forum for the community to gain that knowledge and to have that interaction with Fort Detrick. That's what we were told by the
I can't
EPA.
speak to the EPA's knowledge. He's my
So
conduit
would the
for folks like
EPA,
that.
I mean, shouldn't the EPA be aware of how you're communicating to the public?
I think you're both saying the same thing, just perhaps missing each other. They're a board intended to advise the government of the community's feelings on certain issues.
And does this board meet with the
And
community
they are always,
to get their issues?
these meetings are always open to the public, and there are always members of the public who come.
Right.
Last night, a lot of members of the public came, more than have come since 1972, if I
Yeah,
understand
because
data.
the last RAB meeting, the two individuals that did actually speak up were so frustrated because they said, it's the same, their words were, this is the same dog and pony show we see every time, and we ask a question and we don't get answers. So I'm sure since 1972, people have fallen off because it's not conducive for the community. So obviously there's less attendance. So
Well, I
what
did
I'm wondering is,
misspeak, 1992.
1992.
But in 1992, there was intense community interest. Of course, oh my
Sure.
gosh, there's a new problem, so
Right.
intense community interest.
sure.
And really the same kind of event.
And then it
occurred-
dies
And that
off.
was the
And-
tetrachloroethylene in the water?
Right.
Right.
And it waned. And now
So
it's-
the
it's
board,
like-
the community board for RAB, how do they, maybe the better question is, how do they gain the community interests or issues to bring to this meeting, correct? Because you're saying it's really to advise you on what the community's concerns and issues. So who on that board?
And included in
And what
the
do they do?
members of the RAB are included the folks who attend on a regular basis. We have elected officials or their representatives.
Right.
The media comes occasionally, usually Frederick News Post. I think
But I mean,
may
does
have
that
been to
committee,
at least 2 of them right now. Other
do they
members,
communicate with the individuals to say what are your concerns, or?
Yeah, I have an idea, and it's not because I don't like sitting here for hours and hours, but so is your question, how can you have a dialogue with the people who set the agenda for the RAD
Well,
meetings?
I don't need to have a
be able-
dialogue.
Well, no, I
but-
mean, to get things of
Yeah, I could
interest,
spend here
how
for
can the
hours
community-
and
how can-
reorganize the way that
yeah,
you
how-
guys
how
do
about
what
this?
you do,
How-
of course,
how-
but
to
that's
get-
not,
How can the community effectively communicate what they would like to hear from the RAB? Is that along the
or
line?
is that the form?
And then, or is that the form? And then, so what's the process? Is it something where a request needs to be put in writing to the 2 chairs, or is it more informal where someone comes to a meeting, or?
I think it could be all of those things. We, at one time, had a much larger route. We did, at that date.
Sure.
There were many people on the Restoration Advisory Board, and one of the processes that was followed in the days of initiating Restoration Advisory Boards, and I initiated one elsewhere prior to coming here, is you're really looking for, you don't want them all to be teachers or all to be employees of the base. You want somebody from over this community, somebody
Sure.
from that. Now, over the years, the interest has waned, and we probably don't have the diversity that we at one time had. Now, Mr. Kissen is the newest member of the board, and he certainly represents a section of the community that has not had an opportunity to participate in this board before, but his voice is certainly heard now.
But can I just go back just for a moment? Because, what's your name again, sir?
Gary Zolyak.
Gary, you had mentioned that you had heard that we were, I said that we were posturing ourselves for a lawsuit, and of course, that's true. Is it okay, Chris? It's kind of like the pit bull got out again. That is true. So, I want to ask you again, are you going to make the public aware, and it's very important to me as a father who lost a child, and a daughter who had 2 very abnormal tumors removed, and listen, and a wife or ex-wife who right now is in ICU. So it's very important to me how you answer this. Are you going to make them aware in a public forum with a ton of advertising, and I'll help you, I'll pay it, that those fields were sprayed with Agent Orange?
As the environmental chief, I'm not going to answer that.
What I
Why
think
not?
we need to
Wait,
do-
I was asking him.
Let me just say, and I'm not going to disagree with you. Let me first say that I think what we need to do, Randy, is investigate what we know happened on Detrick.
Kind of the same posture that we know.
Well,
So in
no,
other
no.
words, what we're doing,
What we
it's kind
wanna-
of like a chess game here.
I don't want to
You-
play a chess game. What we
I don't
wanna
either.
do
I would
is
much rather sit here today and say, you know what, we can work something out.
Right.
But if I get in the car, I'm going back to Hawaii, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may.
What I'm saying is, allow us enough time to review the records that we have available to us to find out exactly what happened.
So really, you're just kind of saying basically this is the same as sweet.
What I'm
We have a
saying-
lot of information. And you know that. You guys, come on.
What I'm saying is,
Wait a
if you
minute,
would
Gary,
allow us-
listen to me. You know we know stuff that we're not talking to. You know that. We didn't come here stupid. We didn't spend all this money to come in here and be an ass. But I'm saying we're trying to work some things out here. So I'm asking you, you know stuff, and I'm asking you, here's 400 people right here. 400. right here, real people that we have sat down, eyeball to eyeball and looked at, that are dying. That's a lot of people. Now wait. And I just asked to do a little statistic. They say that Fort Detrick are saying there's 7,900 within a 1 mile radius. That's what my statistician just said Fort Detrick is saying. 7,900. You have 400. Just telling you what you're saying. Could be wrong.
We have 7,900 on post, I'm not sure.
I'm saying as far as
Right.
within a 1 mile radius.
All right, so I do have to
Okay.
add also that you've got people who don't currently live here, so that, I mean, that is one of the
Okay.
things that will be challenging later on. But anyway,
But-
nevertheless,
Sure.
400 out of
Nevertheless.
7,900, yeah.
We have information that I wanted to go in last night and demand everyone's resignation and call a national news conference. On the advice of my counsel, he said, let's wait and try to do some negotiations. Is that right, Chris?
After the fact.
I'm trying to work this out. But
Quite a leash I have.
We're used to pit bulls.
Yes, we are. Very much so. You know you sprayed the fields now. You're EPA, right? Correct?
He's environmental.
Environmental.
Army.
Okay, Army. So you know you sprayed the fields, etc. So we don't go through the whole scenario of the Dottie Blanks, the Howard Dinnermans, who was my great uncle, by the way. Are you familiar with the Dinnermans? Any of you? None of you are familiar with the Dinnermans?
The dinner?
I am.
None of you are familiar with the Dinnermans? The woman who sat out here for 2 years with her husband in the
That
wheelchair,
worked for Detrick.
worked for Detrick, that they took his retirement? None of you are familiar?
Picketed outside.
You're kidding me.
They picketed Fort Detrick.
I've got every news
They went to
article here.
Congress.
It
Yeah.
certainly didn't happen after March 23rd, 2003.
No.
That's when you started.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so we don't want to go through those scenarios again. So now that we know what we know, why doesn't Detrick just come out and say, this is what we're finding out happened?
Well,
And
the same
we're
reason that
investigating
you guys
it.
are holding information on until you have a complete data set of the dioxin study. You know, it's the same reason. You can't go half-cocked into a situation.
Randy,
And so, I mean,
what you would want to do, and what I'm asking you and your group to do, is give us some time to learn what exactly happened here. Rob makes a good point. We don't want to alarm unnecessarily the community, right? But we have pledged to meet with you in 2 weeks or whenever it is Barbara schedules her next meeting. We will share with you what we have learned, you know, the next time that we meet.
Chris, does that sound fair to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to, I mean, I think the point that was made is correct, is that, you know, we may be underwhelmed with your response to the fact, whatever you uncover. That being said, we need to give them the opportunity to uncover it so that they can address it the way they feel, and we can respond in
The
the
problem
right
with
degree.
doing that is historically,
No,
it has not been
no,
addressed,
and
and it has
right.
not been.
But we're
Right.
on it now.
Right.
And
And
so we
there's,
need to figure
Correct.
out and get the full picture
Right.
of what's going on.
And what-
And that's appreciated, the fact that he would even say, in the past week and a half, this is what I've learned, and I'm getting information, that's greatly appreciated. However, it's like Randy said a couple of weeks ago, it's too little too late sometimes, because at this point, there are significant concerns. So if we wait again to get more data and more information, how do we have an assurance when historically nothing has been openly communicated in a forum that, except for in '92 when they were listed and they got some national, do you understand what I'm saying? That's my concern.
There's an inherent, there's an inherent distrust of, maybe both sides, but certainly on the track record of Fort Detrick and the track record of the U.S. government generally with these types of situations, to divulge information as they uncover it, and maybe more importantly, to do the necessary investigation to uncover the important information.
And it's not
provide
a
to the
personal
public.
thing. It's not Colonel Robinson.
Right.
It's not that I don't trust Colonel Robinson or that I
Right.
don't trust you. It's not a personal
but
thing.
now that we're in the situation we're in on the 27th,
Correct.
taking Bob at his word, I mean, I think my advice is we need to give them a chance to digest and present. And we, you know, and hopefully, I presume these are somewhat public documents. I mean, present us with the same thing you review so that we can look at it and say, yeah, okay, and it's presented to the public. I mean, I think there is an interesting point that was raised. I think the explanation of the RAB is the group that, so it's not a public meeting, it's the group that interfaces with the community and brings the community's concerns to you.
Right.
But yet, there's no public forum. You know, it's not like they go out and have their own tent meetings and pull in concerns and
Yeah.
then, so if no one calls them that month or...
Well, actually, they have a duty to go out and be proactive, and you need to assist them.
Well, much
in
like the
going
pit bull
out
owner
and
has a
talking
duty
to the
So,
people around.
this is Cliff Mitchell. Could I
Yeah.
interject a question here?
Thank you for hanging in there, Cliff.
Yeah, you might disrupt us. We're
forgot.
We're almost out the door.
Again, I've been following the conversation closely, and again, it pains me to be here rather than there, but this is just a thought as I'm listening to this conversation. You know, and once again, to sort of think about the two parts of this, one having to do with the question of historical exposures and exposures now in Fort Detrick and what Fort Detrick is doing, and the other related but separate question of community concerns regarding cancer. And I wonder whether it's not worth thinking about the possibility that, and I would probably be an advocate of this if I were asked, which is that to address the question about community concerns of cancer, I would probably think about separating that from the advisory board and in fact from Detrick altogether to some extent, and this is why. Partly it's because obviously there is both a question of trust and other factors, but leaving that aside for the moment, the truth is that the responsibility for public health lies with the public health agencies. And in addition, as we've discussed before, the community concern about cancer may in part be related to Detrick, but it may be related to other factors as well. And so one of the things that might be worth considering, and I don't know if you would entertain this thought, but it may be that a public venue for airing concerns about cancer and trying to get more of those questions answered and engaging in the process of engaging with the community. Inevitably, I'm certain that questions about exposure and Detrick's activities may come up, but to some extent, is it worth contemplating the idea that we ought to think about addressing those community concerns in a form that really is totally separate from the RAB, in fact, totally separate from Detrick altogether.
I think the problem with that, and sorry, I just stole the mic from about 6 people that want to respond. But the problem that I see immediately in trying to create that separation is that I don't think anyone in the community gives one hair about Agent Orange being spread in the fields or TC and PC being dumped in trenches if they don't have some concern about that with respect to their health. And so there's no, it doesn't make sense to field questions to Bob. Nobody wants to hear what Bob does with his day if it doesn't affect them in some way. And the way that it's perceived to affect them and the way that communities respond to these types of issues is because they believe, and we know, that there are potential, at least, health risks associated with these activities and these constituents, and therefore separating them, while I agree that, on a scientific level, you may have an area of focus, but the inquiry from Dr. Brookmeyer in the Department of Health does not necessarily need input on aerial spraying at this point of Agent Orange. but the issues as they're addressed to the community only relate to the community to the extent that they may have impacted their health. No one's talking about, it's not like people are concerned about the lost strawberries in their field because Agent Orange was sprayed.
Chris,
I
maybe,
don't want to-
excuse me. Chris, wait just a minute. Wait. Barbara, excuse me, Barbara Brookmeyer is hosting a meeting in 2 weeks where all this will be aired, hopefully.
Yes, and actually, and Cliff and I haven't had a chance to talk, and actually tomorrow morning he and I are going to be talking about the meeting and the format where I would envision that we would have, to the extent that people are available for this meeting, but I envision it's just going to be one of multiple frequent meetings that we will have to address, till no one wants to come anymore. Both the questions, the concerns, and then the progress, at least from the health department, the progress that we're making in being able to meet the timeline and get the information back out to folks.
And I apologize, because I was actually looking for Barbara to jump in and say, because
She tried to, and I prevented her. But I think that, I still would restate the point is that, Bob can get up and say we dumped X, Y, Z, but it doesn't matter to anyone unless that is comforting or disconcerting as far as their health, because that's, I think, the way the public responds.
I agree with you about that, and what I just was trying to do was point out that, again, from a public health point of view, we are trying to look very broadly and as carefully as possible to address those questions. So we want to ensure that we're not ruling anything out, which is whether it's related to concerns about Detrick, community concerns about other exposures that may be surfaced as a result of this that we're unaware of right now. The goal is not to try to prejudge what the community concerns are or to shut off any avenues of concerns that may be raised. And that was my only point, is that putting this in the context of sort of framing it as we're only going to talk about Detrick and issues related to Detrick is something from a public health point of view that I would try to avoid trying to box us into that right at the outset.
Well, if you're taking a 1 mile radius around Detrick, there's an elephant in that room that you can't really avoid. But I'll let you handle that.
Well, no. But go, Barbara. Did you want to?
Yeah, I think, and I'm still trying to figure out, and I've talked to some folks from the community last night and today about what their interest might be and how to structure the meeting and how to go about it. But it might be that we might end up settling, and when I say we, it's really the community. My plan of approach is to follow what the people who attend the meeting, what they express their interests are. But it might be something where, so say, for example, the question of dioxin. So after we find out, what are some of these parking lot issues, and so say, for example, dioxin, my guess is Agent Orange or dioxin is going to come up. Well, then maybe it'll be something where each representative from the expert agencies, from their perspective, might say, well, what's known about that? So Fort Detrick might say, well, this is what we know. The EPA can say, well, this is what we know from other locations. And that might be the time, Cliff, where, from public health perspectives, or actually it might come in from MDE or EPA, well, we also know that this industrial site right next door, whatever, that the other representatives might bring an additional perspective, but that will truly help to inform the community about what is occurring in their community, Fort Detrick, whatever other potential exposures. And we could go through agent by agent, whatever's been either identified or maybe is even just at the level of a concern because there's been no proof or whatever. And we can go through it and give the public an opportunity to hear what is known about that without putting any of the opinions or qualifiers, just what is known about it. And then if people want to find, and then if we see that people are really struggling with, oh, well, now what does this mean? Well, then we can identify, well, what is a way to help people understand it? Because it might be that it's just too much of a data dump, and it would be my hope that any of the talking heads really present the information in a very understandable format. And so one of the questions about the TMDLs, and even, you know, I'm writing down, so for the SIRs, to be able to communicate that information so that it's understandable. And that would be my hope, that people can do it. And if it's not understandable, then at the next meeting or in subsequent communication through whatever format, we'll continue to try to make it understandable based upon feedback. And so if people stop coming, well, I mean, then it requires, of course, assessing, you know, why they're not coming. But if they're not coming because they're, you know, don't want to hear anymore,
Well, may I
feel they know enough?
may I ask this? And this is probably really off the wall, but this is to Chuck. Chuck, since you do all the press release, et cetera, is that right? You let the community know. Would it be acceptable to you to have Rachel, our PR person, help you do a media blast, PR release, et cetera, with the correct wording to make sure that you get a crowd, to make sure that people are aware? Let me tell you, here's what...
For Dr. Brookmeyer's meeting?
For any of our meetings, RAB meetings, whatever. And let me just tell you the reason why.
Again, for the RAB, this is not necessarily a public meeting. The public is welcome if they show up. But we are not inviting the public at large, because as we saw last night, the RAB had a specific agenda. They had business that had to be accomplished, and we didn't get it accomplished.
Excuse me. There has to be some meeting where the public gets to tell what's going on.
So they're saying that's
because
another
for the last 20 years,
the
they
last
haven't.
meeting that some of your folks attended was a community meeting. The Dr. Sporak from RID briefed and Colonel Robinson briefed.
Right.
It went really long. We tried hard to find time for people to make their comments, but the two briefings were very long. We just ran out of time. We will be scheduling another one of those. Gary, have you heard any timeline on that?
They're supposed to be every 2 months. I think the Colonel made that commitment that it'd be every...
She said she's going to try to do it every 2 months. It depends on her availability and some other options. The Army requires us to do those pretty much annually. And this is the first one we've done for a couple of years now because of a lot of different reasons. But we're going to be doing more of those, and we are going to try to pull another one up in about 2 months or so, depending on availability of several factors and getting schedules to mesh up. We are going to be doing that again.
Okay.
John, this may seem, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. This may seem counterintuitive, but believe it or not, the RAB really is not a creature of Fort Detrick. Right? We support the RAB. We want the public, you know, to discuss issues with the RAB. But that RAB meeting is independent of Fort Detrick.
Okay. And let me just make this comment in reply.
Sure.
You have, it would appear, a major problem with public relations. Okay, from what I hear out there.
Yes.
Okay, a major problem.
In what way, John?
Some people believe that you poison them and cause them with cancer. Okay, so. Right, I'm being very straightforward here.
And I appreciate
right.
that. Yeah.
So if you were to go out into the community, whether it's a RAB, I don't care whether it's a RAB or it's somebody from Fort Detrick, but you need to know. You need to know what's going on out there, because it would appear that because that didn't happen, your investigation somehow got sort of led down the wrong path, or certainly hasn't addressed all the issues that we now are concerned about.
And I want to tell you, I think you make a good point in this way. Prior to last night, the RAB meetings were actually held on Detrick.
Ah, okay.
And
yeah, right.
And we did that because it was just convenient for everyone.
Right.
But as you probably have known, if you've tried to get on a military installation, some of that process of having your car inspected.
Yeah, I've invaded federal facilities before, but
sure, and Colonel Robinson said that's why they wanted to do it with Chester Hall. And that's fantastic.
Right. And so
what he's saying is that if that's not a
Right.
beast of Fort Detrick, then maybe Fort Detrick should have another form of communicating with the public.
And it sounds like they
So-
do, but they don't happen very
Right,
often.
and so you're saying in a couple more months.
Yeah, we're actually embarking, we just kind of reevaluated this about 6 months ago or so, and looked at, okay, how are we interacting with the community? And we are actually, there's councils all over the area that we're gonna be partnering with them, getting involved in them. We've got some school programs we're starting to really get in on, and so.
And those are great, like
we
the
do have
arbor,
identified
the
that.
arbor project that you've gotten, all of those things are fantastic.
But we are
However,
trying to
there's
educate
not
some more
one,
people.
I mean, we're talking about deer, we're talking about trees, we're talking about planting and going green and all of these great, fantastic things.
But these community
no-
meetings really
nothing
have
has
some
been
concern.
set
We're
up
actually
for
looking at one
people
right
that are
now
dying
with
of
our neighbors.
cancer
You know,
in our community.
Right, so I
Impact
give you a good
So-
piece, well, you can take it for what it is. You have a guy going around who's sampling, right? Give him basically a check sheet and say, ask these questions and see what you get as an answer, okay? And we all know what the questions should be, and one of them should be, what actually has happened with your health, and why, and do you think Fort Detrick is responsible? And you'll get some alarming results.
From a legal point of view, and Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, when you start asking people about their personal health, you really start to have legal issues about privacy. And
All they have to say is, yes, I'll answer the question, or no, I won't.
Okay.
That's true.
And I think.
As long as you don't, kiss the wall.
Names or anything.
They know where you live.
I mean, I think that we've reached sort of a point of diminishing return, but I think the point is that from the EPA's perspective, the public interface is the rabbit, which is not right, and we've been told that's not true. It's a community meeting that doesn't happen very often. Like what Randy has proposed, and I don't have an opinion, but at least the point is, those meetings don't seem to happen very often, and if and when they do, they're not well advertised. And so, how do we improve that, I think is the question. And I think the answer maybe lies in the next 2 or 3 weeks of thought when we come back and discuss it.
I would agree. Good.
Well, here's what I'd like to do, and again, if you're not comfortable, that's okay. But Chris, if you could talk to your client and give us your thoughts on an acceptable way forward, and we don't have to have a very developed sort of set of ideas, but give me your thoughts on kind of what you see as the best way forward. And as I said, the other thing is that certainly Detrick pledges to meet with this group again, either the morning, whichever more convenient, the morning prior to Barbara's evening meeting or the day after, and we can start talking about what we've heard from you today, and talk about the Agent Orange, what we've learned, talk about the issue of publicity and how we might be able to work together to make that more effective. Let's see where this process goes.
Great. I just have 2 questions, and I'll be quiet the rest of the evening. I brought them up last night, and I wasn't really satisfied with the answer. The Decon system, the 2 sewer systems that you have. Have you ever? How long have you been? 2003.
7 years.
7 years. Have you ever had any leakage out of that system?
There have been mishaps over the years, and I won't deny that. However,
Was the public aware of that?
You have to understand, first of all, the science here is that this effluent comes from laboratories, and it is decontaminated once and possibly twice in the laboratory, even before it gets to the laboratory sewer system.
But it's still contaminated.
Where it goes to a cooker.
I understand the whole
Now,
process.
let's please say potentially contaminated, but after 1 or 2 treatment processes, it is probably innocuous. Yes, there have been some mishaps, and it will not mislead you on that.
Why didn't someone answer that last night when I asked?
There was a lot of questions last night.
Right.
I know, but I asked you last night.
Well, I don't think you specifically looked at me and asked me that question.
Okay. But you knew the answer.
I knew the answer.
But you didn't want to answer.
There was a lot of questions.
Okay, so the answer is yes. And from my understanding, a couple of those people were put in quarantine that actually...
Now, that's information that I don't have. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I have a lot of friends that work for Fort Detrick.
That's information I did not have.
Second question was, 4 of these 400 work in what they call a hot building, who have cancer. They called and said that they could not be at the meeting last night because they were threatened with termination. Just from my knowledge.
That's not environmental.
That actually is very likely highly inaccurate, simply because of the Whistleblower Act. So,
I understand the Whistleblower Act, but I'm just telling you, 4 independent people who work.
Yeah.
Well,
Find that guy and fire him or her.
well, my advice to you would be, those friends, they need to make sure they go through legal channels to make sure that, because they are protected under the Whistleblower Act. And so, they need to, please advise them that if they are being threatened in such a manner, that they need to go through their legal channels, because that's a violation of the law. Because you can't be threatened like that. That's, like I said, violation of the Whistleblower Act.
Okay.
All right, I just have one other request. In your research over the next couple of weeks, if you can talk to the people that developed whatever they developed. I don't need to know necessarily, though I'd like to. But, you know, dioxin is one, and it's one that's been recognized in the public sphere. I don't know what else was, dreamed up. But if we're going to get a proper list of analytes to look for, now we're getting serious. Somebody who's involved in this investigation needs to know the full list. And you don't even have to explain why or whatever, but the point is that list needs to be exhaustive, because if there's something out there that's as bad as dioxin, the public really needs some protection, okay? Secondly, there's this Clover Hill, and I've heard a lot of information that there's stuff buried on the inside of that fence line. And if there's, you probably know that there's individual wells along there. Things like geophysical surveys, things like metal surveys, things like looking at aerial photographs, stuff like that. I'm going to be looking at aerial photographs to see if there's anything that I can find, just as I looked at Area B. And I'll share them with you.
And I'd appreciate it if you would.
Yeah.
Well, just so you don't waste time in the wrong part of Post, the only known burial area that we have on Area A is right by our main gate, on the opposite side of Post, in Clover Hill. And there was no requirement to close that with a cap. The state closed that site out probably in the early 90s. There was no further action site.
And what was buried there?
Well, I'll tell you what I saw. When they built the commissary, they actually removed probably the bulk of that and hauled it away to a permanent landfill. I saw bricks. I saw asbestos. I saw one big bone, a very big bone. That's what I saw with my eyes.
Was it the pit bull's bone?
That is the only site where I'm aware
I had no
of a
idea.
burial, and there is actually some residual. There is some waste left, but I'm not.
Was there a vault in that building?
A vault?
A vault, like, yeah, a vault.
Well, I'm not talking about building. I'm talking about where the commissary is today.
There was
an open
some
field.
open ground. Okay.
Open ground, and
Okay.
it had been a disposal site. I'm not sure
All
why.
right. So as well as that, now we're getting down to nuts and
But
bolts.
that is quite remote from Clover Hill.
Okay. In the past, was a vault excavated, and people got injured from excavating that vault?
I've never heard of it either.
Okay. Okay.
Help us with a year? I mean.
No, I can, but I guess I'm interested in if you know of anything, I'll certainly share with you what I can. But I'm just saying, what I do know is that somebody, at least a couple of people were injured excavating that vault from some sort of chemical agent, some sort of active ingredient in that vault.
If you could share whatever you feel comfortable.
Now the other thing is there's a shuttered building in Fort Detrick that has been referred to that is basically quarantined. Is that the case?
Are you referring to the Anthrax Hotel? by any
Maybe
chance?
so.
What used to be known
What
as-
used to be known as the Anthrax Hotel. This was the home of offensive biowarfare
Right.
research prior to 1969. There was one building called the Pilot Building. Other people called it the Anthrax Hotel. It was 3 or 4 stories tall, and they batches of anthrax were, what was the right word? Cultured there. They were cultured, and there were releases inside of that building, and they shuttered that building, and it was shuttered for decades. That building came as one of the first things. Now, that's not Army land, and there's a little subtlety here, make sure you understand. There's a 69-acre enclave inside of Fort Detrick. It's a National Cancer Institute land, not Army land. It just happened to be sitting within our fence. But the Anthrax Hotel was demolished, I'm going to say 2004-ish.
Actually, even demolished is disassembled is more
Disassembled. I mean, they did this spraying with water to make sure, because there was anthrax.
Right,
and they kept it wet, and it was disposed of to,
They didn't spray it in bleach?
Sorry?
I would have thought you'd have sprayed it in bleach or something. Just water.
I don't know.
They
Just to
used
keep
bleach,
dust down.
the way the story goes, and this is all before my time, but they did use bleach repeatedly during the decommissioning process, but in the demolition process, they used water to keep dust from being suppressed. Now, that stuff went, National Cancer Institute disposed of it. I couldn't tell, I don't want to lie to you and tell you I know where it went, because I don't.
Well, luckily, we haven't found anybody with anthrax.
Yeah, here you have it.
And there's cures for them.
Gary, right? As you guys are going through your, gathering your more information and everything, we'd like to hear more about the research files from David Huxell. And also, I want to throw this another name out at you, Dr.
I'm sorry, how do you spell his last
Bergdorfer.
name?
Huxoll.
And do you know where he was?
Is he alive?
Yeah.
Is he alive?
I never heard the name.
Just if you could look at the research files on
You'll
that.
have you'll have a file.
Dr.
Do you know where he-
Bergdorfer.
Do you know where he was at then? Was he USAMRID?
Burgdorfer.
Norm Covert knows everybody
Okay.
that was alive back in those days. And
Okay.
Joe spoke with him last week, so we know he's still alive. Go ahead.
Okay, the other name, I'm sorry, I have Huxley.
Dr. I'll spell it Burgdorfer.
D-O. Okay, that will do.
Thank you.
Good.
And what do you want me to do, just find out?
While you're just doing, coming forthright as far as Agent Orange and having another meeting for everybody, you know,
Okay, but as far as these 2 names, you want me to
postures
find out?
ourselves, if you could pull their file or give us any type of information.
Okay, let me see what I can find.
Do you think they were associated with Agent Orange? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand that.
I know they're associated with some people who died.
Whatever I can find, I'd be happy to share.
Mass has ended, let's go in peace.
Did any of you read the Killing Winds?
Mhm.
What'd you think of it?
It was an interesting read.
Do you believe
I
it's-
didn't read it in depth. I read it after the handout from last night. I read it, skimmed through it today and read some pieces of it. And so
Do you believe it's fact?
I think everything has a bit of fact in it. So, like I said, I skimmed through it. I don't have all the details. I haven't done a full academic study on it, but I read through it. So.
Good.
All right, Barbara, I want to thank you for hosting the meeting. You did a
Thank
fine
you,
job.
Barbara.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Bergdorfer.
Thank you for coming, and, I know I said I'd take notes, but then I realized I was just sitting there for some of it. I wrote things that I felt that I needed to follow up on, but it actually didn't cover all the stuff, so,
Okay.
That's good.
I think we got
all right.
some way down the
But
road.
if-
Just
Do
the
you want
pit
the
bull,
names?
just where the pit bull is now.
Oh, I don't know, do you really have pit bulls and children?
I do.
Oh, we had a big old boom.
Thanks. Oh, Cliff, if you're still there, thank you.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff.
If you're not.
Cliff's gone.
Barbara, I'll touch base with you.
Wake up, Cliff.
Okay.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
You as well.
It sounds like you are physically in the phone here.
I know, I was physically here actually the whole time.
Yeah.
Where is
Good to see ya.
Chris?
In Baltimore. Yeah. Okay,
Very good.
and then, I'll need to walk all of you out because all the doors are locked, so.
As I
That's- Yeah, so I was gonna say, you hadn't been back for a while, I thought, you must be stuck in the locked area.
Well, that's all.
Here we can start a long trail here. Yeah, so I'm hoping I have the date for when we can call it.
I'm sure you will. They have to go through there.
Yeah, well, let's see, well, yeah.
Bill on me last night. You know what, I said everybody was so tired, I had enough.
It's that exit, so the flagpole, it's that exit, which is, if you made a left when you came into the parking lot. Because we have 2 floors, but they're really all first floors. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, finding your way there.
Thanks.
And I'll stay here in case any of you, realize that you need to come back in and go out.
Thank you, sir.
Rachel, how's the babies? Your daughter.
On it better?
They came back with like 3 of the 12 biopsies today, and they all came back negative. So we're waiting on that.
You all want to get over here and talk a second?
Take care, thank you.
Obvious what it's all about. Let me just tell you first of all, Chris, what absolutely floors, and I'm just being honest, is that they haven't even thought about Agent Orange. Wait a minute, come on, for a week and a half, and the Kristen Renee Foundation had to bring that